Northwest Sports Podcast back again from the dead, rising from the ashes like a phoenix the day after the Super Bowl. And what a game. I'm very happy I was able to watch most of it. Kyle Smith, it was a great game, was it not?
It was a great game. It came down to the final play in a lot of ways. It reminded me of the Rams-Titans game from all those years ago, just how it truly came down to like a last-minute play, and it was just an awesome experience for everybody.
I really enjoyed just the game. I thought it was the Super Bowl I enjoyed the most since Arizona-Pittsburgh. A lot of big plays, a lot of big players, great coaching on both sides. And I'm ready to dive into this thing. What about you?
Oh, of course. I'm always ready.
All right. Well, we can't really ignore the elephant in the room per se. So obviously the first key we're going to bring up for the game is the final play call and the final play. And to provide a little bit of backstory, New England drives down the field kind of effortlessly, gets a touchdown where Edelman just works Simon over like a rag doll and gets the touchdown. They go up 28-24 with 2:02 to go, which actually worked out pretty well for Seattle because off the kickback, they were still at 2:02, so they had that 2-minute warning to give them an extra timeout, which came. And then the next play, I believe, was the Marshawn wheel route where Jamie Collins decided he didn't know how to run anymore and gave up 31 yards. And that was a huge play that Seattle got. And then a couple missed passes, small plays, and then Curse had one of the craziest catches ever. Antonio Freeman.
That we'll ever see.
Yeah.
Again, obviously the Super Bowl is going to inflate something like that to be larger than life, more so than it would be if it was in the regular season. But still, even if you saw that in the regular season, I mean, that is one of the best catches I think I've ever seen. Well, luckiest catches, I should say.
Yeah, to say that there's not luck involved with that is ridiculous, but still, great job keeping your eye on the ball, staying in the game, staying focused.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. We can't really blame the New England players for not being there to knock the ball away, even though there's the third safety jumped over and could have done something, but you really don't think about that in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's really just so unique to have a player that could do something unique, like that, like Earl Thomas smacking the guy's arm to create the fumble in the playoffs. I mean, just great players make great plays, and good players make good plays, obviously, and you can't really expect anyone to modify their game for that. And then the next play, I believe, Marshawn had a 4 or 5 yard run and got him to the 1 yard line where, via Twitter, all hell broke loose. Kyle, would you like to take down the breakdown of what the play entailed?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what this is, and it will always be called this, the play. Like, people are just going to know it off of that because it was so controversial. Basically, Doug Baldwin was lined up in the slot, and then Lockett outside of him. And then Baldwin went up to block Brandon Browner from being able to defend the quick slant coming in.
I thought it was Curse and Browner.
Maybe it was Curse, yeah. So Curse blocks Browner. And then Lockett sneaks in underneath, and before he can catch the ball,
Malcolm Butler.
I was like, what's his first name?
And that hesitation kind of says it all about where that player was all year.
Yeah, and undrafted guy. I heard he was working out of Popeyes for a little bit, sometime last year. So
he worked in the same mall as Chris Matthews worked at the Foot Locker.
Yeah, basically. He actually bought a pair of shoes from him one time. Cool, but we'll tell you that story later. But yeah, what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that throwing the ball on the goal line is pretty safe, just as safe as possibly a fumble would be. And obviously, the reason why they did that was because they had one timeout left, and they knew if they ran 2 running plays that they wouldn't probably have time for a third, so that's why you go for the pass on second down, hoping that you can then run it third and fourth down. So what do you think?
Well, I think this is going to be one of the more overanalyzed plays in history, at least recent history of the NFL for sure, and obviously culture dictates whatever happened most recently is what's most talked about. I think that I definitely would have ran it on second, thrown on third, and then ran it on fourth. Just you have Marshawn. Marshawn is pretty much been getting at least a few yards every single rush. He was average 4.3 yards per carry in the game. Didn't really stop him for that many losses at all. I think he had no gain twice and 21 yards of one or more positive yards for rushes. So obviously he was doing what beast mode always does without breaking the random 60-yard touchdown. But the play in and of itself was a great play.
Yeah.
I mean, Lockett was open, and Butler just made an insanely great read and went for the ball instead of for the receiver, which is what I feel like a lot of young defensive backs
don't do.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're Janoris Jenkins and you do it way too much.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to a bigger problem where why is Ricardo Lockett their go-to guy in the most important play of the year? Like, obviously, Baldwin's a better receiver, and he's getting locked down by Rivas on the other side of the formation, which is fine. I can't argue with not throwing it against Darrell Rivas in that situation.
Yeah.
But I feel that they need to get a big-time receiver. They tried it with Percy Harvin, didn't work. Obviously, some fans might start pimping Chris Matthews, but you really have no idea what this guy is. I mean, he's really big and tall, and that's awesome and unique. But I feel like they should invest, a first-round pick. I know they just drafted Paul Richardson, but that guy's not going to really win one-on-one on the outside, most likely. He's more of a slot threat speed guy. So, Kyle, do you think this speaks to Seattle Seahawks and their, as of right now, inability to find that number one receiver to go with the quarterback and the running back, that three-headed monster that a lot of great teams like to have and do have, like Dallas does, for instance, right now?
Yeah, I think it did hurt him because when you look across the board, you see wide receivers with similar skill sets in New England, but they have Rob Gronkowski as an alpha target for them no matter when they need to use him. When you look at guys like Edelman, Amendola, those guys compare pretty closely. I mean, they're obviously a little bit smaller, but they compare pretty closely to Doug Baldwin and Paul Richardson, or what Percy Harvin was before that. And then the Patriots went out and got their Brandon LaFell, who's basically, their Jermaine Kearse,
I think he's a little bit better.
I think he's older, better too.
But he's also older, and Kearse could get there.
Yeah, I think he's a much better route runner, like in general route terms, whereas Kearse is just mostly great on like deep posts and flies and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it really showed, I think that they had a chance to win the game, and it really ended up hurting them that they didn't have that outside target they felt like they could just go to. Because that's what the Cowboys do. I mean, like you said, they just put Dez out, and if there's any sort of one-on-one, it's a guarantee the ball's going right there.
Yeah, 90% of the time it's going to Dez on a one-on-one.
And it's 99% effective almost. Like, I mean, not 99%.
Look at the New England game. Gronkowski didn't break any big plays outside the touchdown, but if he had one-on-one coverage, they would go to him. He was like an 80% catch rate, and he would get the first down.
Yeah.
On that final drive they had, he had two big first downs, one on the 2nd and 11, and then I think one on 1st and 10, or 3rd and 8. But yeah, like Gronkowski did what he was supposed to do, be the first down guy and dominate. And speaking of Gronkowski and tight ends, where was Luke Wilson all game? I was extremely surprised. He seemed to really be turning it on the end of the year, especially in the playoffs, and he always is good for a couple big plays a game for them, and he just didn't even get a target all game. I was extremely surprised by that development.
Yeah, I was very surprised, and the thing that I found to be most confusing was Seattle Seahawks' game plan and going with multiple wide receiver sets the entire game. Like, they didn't really run their huge, heavy formations where they run Marshawn and then try and work the PA rollout, where that's where Wilson's money is, on those fake stretch plays, and then you roll back. But maybe they figured it wasn't a good matchup, Jamie Collins versus Luke Wilson, like, that's a pretty unfair matchup for Luke Wilson, I feel like.
Yeah, Collins is a young developing player, but he has very good size and athleticism as a potential really good coverage linebacker.
Yeah.
In the mold of a Levante David or Thomas Davis. He probably won't be as good as either one of those, but you could, theoretically see it's not an outlandish claim.
No.
And, I was just surprised to see Luke Wilson not there. Tony Moeaki obviously didn't do much. His role has been scaled back. I think he got hurt again, probably knowing him.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that Doug Baldwin, even though Rivas was on him, didn't even get more looks than he did?
Yeah, I'm very surprised by that because I think he's got that dog in him.
Yeah.
Where no matter if he's going against Darrell Revis or not, he's gonna go after the ball like it's his. And I think that he could shake Revis. I mean, I don't sit there and think to myself, wow, I saw a few instances of Baldwin beating Revis, but I also wasn't paying attention for that specifically. So, I mean, who knows? If we were to be able to go back and watch the game tape right now, how many times did he shake him? But did Russell Wilson just not look there?
Was there too much pressure? Yeah, I mean Revis
was an underrated aspect of this game.
I mean Revis is obviously an amazing cornerback. You can make the case he's the best in the league. I think that he still is just because he shadows number ones and should box people down. The only catch Baldwin had was the touchdown on the crossing route where Baldwin used the ref as in a pick play, which if that was Jermaine Kearse, that would have been a penalty. But since it wasn't, it worked out well. Good job, Doug Baldwin, for seeing that potential advantage.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Take any inch you can get and turn it into a mile.
Yep.
So great job there on Doug Baldwin. Even though that was your only catch, you did get the touchdown, and it was a very interesting play. Do you want to talk about Chris Matthews? Because I feel like we have to. Because he looked really good in the first half, and then New England, they didn't change their defensive back structure and who lines up against two, and then the second play of the second half, he gets another massive catch on the outside, jumping over Logan Ryan. There's a 6-inch height difference there. The next play, immediately Belichick puts Brandon Browner on him, and he does nothing the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So does that speak to, obviously, that was his first game. I feel like the lack of tape on him gave New England nothing to really work off of, and that gave Seattle a very good advantage they used well. And obviously Russell knows this guy in practice, and the 2 weeks leading up, hey, he can catch balls that are just thrown up in the air because he's so tall.
Yeah.
So I think like outside of Michael Bennett, he was one of their better players, especially in the first half.
Yeah, well, and you nailed it, though. I mean, the Patriots just didn't know that it was coming.
No one knew. Like, diehard Seahawks fans, man, who's Matthews? And I'm like, he's the practice squad guy that took Paul Richardson's spot, and I don't know anything else besides that.
Yeah. No, he was just, they weren't really playing up on him at first at all. Like that touchdown he got, he was like super uncontested, straight to the end
guy
zone.
Was basically, they were on the 8 or so, and I believe it was Logan Ryan again, was on the 1. He's like 7-8 yards off.
Yeah, just like letting him. And Russell Wilson has one of the best high balls, I think, in the NFL. Like when that dude throws it downfield, his receivers have a lot of time to like get underneath it.
I feel like that's just a trait that a lot of short quarterbacks have to develop because they have to arc their throws growing up over bigger linemen. Because Doug Flutie and Andrew Brees are both like that, and they're on the shorter side for starting quarterbacks.
They highball it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well. Yeah, because they have to. Yeah, like you said, their arm mechanics have to be so much more consistent. Whereas like a bigger quarterback, like even Tom Brady, can adjust his arm.
Like,
Flacco.
Stafford, Rivers, Joe Flacco, those are very good examples of guys that, have great arms for arm strength, and Rivers more so in the past, but they're able to adjust their throwing mechanics because they can see different angles easier than Russell. And then Russell's mobility helps him create angles, whereas Rivers could never do that, for instance.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that just Matthews had a great game. But like we said, it speaks to your lack of depth, one could say, at receiver when Ricardo Lockett has his second most catches and the guy above him who had the best game of your receivers was an undrafted free agent who played his first NFL game in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. But, I mean, that's some master strategy, too, by the Seahawks, and it shows that, the guys that they're bringing in are capable. I mean, they're not going to be the stars, the number one types necessarily, but they are finding guys to fill that role, and we saw that manifested on the field on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. If Percy Harvin, theoretically and hypothetically, is where Ricardo Lockett is at on the last play of the game for the Seahawks, does he make that catch? Because I think he does.
He probably would. But at the same time, I don't know, the way he jumped that route, I just have a hard time believing that anybody could have done anything in that situation. Like, that guy literally knew. I mean, outside of Russell throwing it more behind the wide receiver, which is something that people should be talking about as well. But, I don't know. If I were in that situation, and I see Percy Harvin, do I react faster or slower than if it's Ricardo Lockett?
Does he get out of this? Does Harvin even get out of the break even faster? And he has better hands than Ricardo Lockett, assuming he isn't injured in the middle of the game. So, maybe just an interesting question.
Does Percy Harvin end up getting a migraine and run the wrong route?
That's possible. Or does he take a jet sweep and then score a 55-yard rushing touchdown, even though he stepped out of bounds 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and they just don't even care?
Yeah, that could definitely happen.
So I brought up one of my favorite coaching adjustments, which was moving Brandon Browner onto Chris Matthews. Another one I felt like a lot of people aren't talking about is New England completely going away from LeGarrette Blount for the most part in the second half, and pretty much using exclusively Shane Vereen. And good evidence of that is Shane Vereen had 11 catches, Russell Wilson had 12 completions.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a huge difference in yardage per attempt and how many yards were accumulated, but Shane Vereen, using him a lot more to get first downs, was a huge thing for the Patriots in the fourth quarter and throughout the entire game. And I really feel like that's a great adjustment Belichick and Josh McDaniels decided just to go with that they probably talked about.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like, the Seahawks all day were fixated on trying to make the big play, and New England was consistently playing the holes in zone defense or finding the one-on-one man coverage where, let's be honest, Bobby Wagner is one of the best coverage middle linebackers in the NFL, and he just could not hang with Shane Vereen's shit today.
No.
Like, he could not whatsoever, and that was consistently one of the matchups. That's why he ended up with, 12 tackles. But I just think that's was something that New England did in the game planning stages, is they knew which areas they wanted to attack and when, because Edelman also had a bunch of catches. The one time Seattle messed up and put KJ Wright on Gronk, they knew exactly when it was going to happen.
They saw it was man coverage.
Yep.
Earl couldn't get over, most likely.
Yep, and they took and just Gronkowski destroyed him.
It wasn't even close.
Made it look like it was scripted.
Yeah,
honestly, like it was that much of it just to own. And so I think that was a great adjustment by the I think the Seahawks were outcoached.
Yeah, I agree.
They needed like a fake punt or a fake kick or some crazy play. That just never happened.
Some of those gadget plays that New England uses on defense, Seattle could have used on offense because of their lack of playmakers, I feel like, especially facing a defense this good and this well coached. Yeah. I feel like it would have helped whether it be another John Ryan fake punt first down or maybe a jet sweep to Jermaine Kearse, get him in the open field with the ball and him do some things. Mm-hmm. I was surprised they didn't try any of those. But also, I'd like to point out on Seattle's positive side, I was pretty impressed with their offensive line for the most part.
Yeah.
They gave Russell a lot of time. New England didn't blitz much, which was to be expected in my opinion. But they and J.R. Sweezy, he got blown up a couple times by Vince Wilfork pretty bad, but he did a admirable and I would say unexpectedly really good job blocking Vince Wilfork. I don't know if you noticed that as well.
Yeah, no, he was solid. There were definitely times where he was shook, and like Wilfork was just threw him off of him and like tackled Lynch for a no gain. But like you were saying earlier in the podcast, it didn't really happen very often that Marshawn wasn't gaining a few yards, and so that's a credit to Sweezy.
Yeah, he did great. You want to talk about how dominant Michael Bennett was all game for the second straight Super Bowl?
Yeah,
he was the best player maybe on either team, definitely in my opinion on Seattle.
They lined him up at defensive end, defensive tackle. I think he's a great 3-tech.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a couple plays where he was penetrating, rushing upfield, but he also had some plays where he was stunting, and then he just like moves from the top of the defensive line all the way around the edge and like almost swan-like. No dude, he took the perfect angle and no dude touched him. And then he just bolts upfield and almost like destroys Brady, and he forced that pick in the first quarter on Brady.
Yeah, that was potentially a touchdown to Edelman.
Yeah.
That Michael Bennett decided he didn't want to have happen, and Brady threw an absolute garbage pass. It was completely rushed because of Michael Bennett, and it was an easy pick for Lane. And speaking of Jeremy Lane, a very big part of this game, and I feel like it contributed a decent amount to the success of Edelman and even Shane Vereen to a lesser extent was the injury to Jeremy Lane.
Yeah.
He got that pick that was, I think he caught it on the 3-yard line roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he got about a 20-yard return, and when he got tackled, his arm, Anderson Silva, had been completely broken in half. Yeah. Clean break, really nasty if you've seen the photos on Twitter or ESPN. I feel that Jeremy Lane's injury directly contributed to a lot of those first downs that Simon gave up. If he's in the game, Simon's not there in a position he shouldn't have been in. It's hard to say whether Seattle would have won just because of that one injury, but I feel like it had a huge impact on the entire game.
It did, for real. Because, like you said, Edelman just destroyed Darrell Simon.
And that's what Edelman's supposed to do.
Yeah.
He's a top 20 receiver, roughly, especially when you need a first down chain mover type, a PPR monster, and he destroyed Simon. He has that footwork, that Chris Carter-like footwork, and he kind of made Simon look foolish, especially on the touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, and the one Brady completely missed, where he overthrew him bad, and to me it was a worse overthrow than the Wes Welker pass. But so the Lane injury was huge, obviously, and then, what about the my favorite moment of the game would be Cam Chancellor's hit on Julian Edelman, where he looked like he just kind of broke his body in half, and then Edelman immediately gets up and tries to run for another 6 yards, even though he's already down.
Right.
That was a great moment of the game.
Yeah.
Cam got his one hit. Bam Bam showed up for one hit.
Yeah, and honestly, it just showed the Patriots' mental and physical toughness to not be backing down from them in that moment. I think in a lot of ways, Julian Edelman kind of exemplifies some of the toughness for that team. Yeah. He's you don't usually hear that associated with the wide receiver. I mean, usually it's a physical back like LeGarrette Blount or Marshawn Lynch that kind of
or a defensive lineman like Vince Wilfork.
Yeah, but I just offensive. There's not really a lot of guys that set the tone for their teams. Maybe
Joe Thomas.
Maybe that guy.
But he's also, an all-pro 9 straight years, so he's kind of an outlier anyway, just because how good he is.
But so I think Edelman does that for this team. I mean, not like the team doesn't have Tom Brady or anything, but still, Tom Brady's not the one running across the field, catching it and getting concussed by Cam Chancellor.
Passed the test.
And then running 7 yards down the field because he has no idea that his knee has already touched the ground because he blacked out for 2 seconds. But, I mean, like I said, you need guys like that to play and play hard. And I think it kind of sent a message to the team that, hey, we can do this.
Speaking of sending a message and mental and physical toughness, I want to bring up the fight when they tried to get they got Michael Bennett jumping off sides, which he does a lot, but at the same time, that's one negative out of maybe 17 positive plays that guy had in that game.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me at all if Bennett had the highest PFF grade of anyone on either team, to be honest. But what were your thoughts on the fight outside of, in my opinion, what should be obviously thought on both sides is unnecessary and classless?
That's exactly it. I mean, it's such a big game, and it was such a crazy shift. Because, I would think that, Seahawks were going to win that game. They made a bad play.
The odds that Brady could drive down the field and get a touchdown with what would have been 25 seconds after the kickoff was left are extremely low, we'll say, if not impossible.
Yeah, very low.
Although they would have only needed a field goal, actually, because they were up by 4.
They would have.
So that helps it a little bit, but still, 25 seconds to go 35 yards against that defense.
Actually, 25 seconds would have been pretty doable.
But against that defense, when they know they don't have to worry about the run at all.
Yeah, which they weren't worrying about, though.
Yeah, that's a good point, because speaking of adjustments, the LeGarrette Blount, the Vereen thing, and the running, too, because Vereen had a couple draws that actually got some really good positive yardage on that last drive, I mean.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think Vereen kind of earned himself some cash.
Yeah.
Showing out a little bit.
Maybe they'll sign him to an extension and cut Ridley coming off the injury, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
Something to think about. And speaking of cash, who benefited the most as a player in terms of a potential raise or a new contract, or who showed up that you didn't expect to show up completely, where they might actually benefit greatly financially? going into last season, Marson, like the whole Seahawks team basically made themselves a ton of money, well deserved.
Yeah.
I feel like the end of this season as an upcoming free agent, Devin McCourty made himself a ton of money, just solidifying himself as one of the best deep back safeties in the league. Is there anyone that you saw that is a young player that could have had a breakout game that could potentially be a Pro Bowler in the future that we weren't expecting it to happen, for instance, that just played really well?
I mean, are we going to just move past the obvious one and Chris Matthews? Because, I mean, that dude could have earned himself a lot of money.
I feel like he earned himself a contract for sure going with guaranteed money.
Exactly.
Even if it's not much.
Even if it's not much, but now he has an opportunity and now he's thought of. I don't know if there's any of the younger guys. I think that maybe Jeremy Lane made his money because he had that interception. You didn't see – if he put on some excellent film for somebody in that and then backs it up by having a solid year in place of Maxwell, this could be like the game, where that changed. And now he really is going to be being viewed as like a top corner, just like Maxwell is being courted as right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would obviously say those are the first ones that come to mind. You said McCourty.
Yeah.
Revis is obviously, Pats are not picking up that 25 million.
They just don't have the cap.
Yeah.
I mean, they could probably work that $25 million in if they wanted to, but then you're not getting Devin McCourty back.
Yeah.
You're not, being able to extend your players. You're going to be in such a pinch to add new players and change things up as they always do a little bit here and there. So they could bring Revis back, but if they do, it'll be on a lot longer contract. And I also think they're going to cut Browner too.
They could. They could very easily do that. I mean, he's getting paid a lot of money.
He got signed 2 and 10.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's not like terrible, but I mean,
for a guy that
easy to cut him.
Commits penalties all the time, it's not really a huge issue. Is he really good? Yeah, but he makes a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. I think Marshawn Lynch might have earned a contract extension.
Yeah.
I think that he showed how valuable he really is.
I think I heard reports that he was going to get 4 and 31. Which I don't know why he would accept that.
Insane.
That's
what he already had, I thought.
He's only getting 7 per year. So it's like basically.
But they bumped him up
to 7
the last 2 years. Oh, 2-7?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like he could get more on the open market, to be honest, because he's seen as such a pivotal piece. But at the same time, it's running backs. He's getting older, but he hasn't lost a step at all, and he had his best year ever this year.
Yeah. So think about that as a GM. How are you going to bring in a guy that operates like that?
And how are you, as the GM of the Seahawks, going to let him go?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
I don't care how good Turbin looks in his 3 carries a game.
Yeah,
it's 3 carries a game. He's not the heart and soul of that offense. Yeah. Say what you want about Russell, but Marshawn is he's the fuel to make the engine go.
Yeah, he is. He's even without Russell Wilson, they'd still be making the playoffs probably on just Marshawn Lynch.
With that defense, absolutely.
They'd probably still be making the playoffs with Russell Wilson without Marshawn Lynch. But
great teams, you can take a player away and still make noise. Especially when you're as well-rounded as Seattle is.
Yeah.
And speaking of being well-rounded, what do you see for these two teams heading into the draft really quick and potentially just extending players? Obviously, Russell Wilson's going to get a contract this offseason. I think everyone knows that's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, are there some big changes you see on either team? What are they going to target in the draft potentially? Obviously, it's after free agency and everything, but do you see anything that's a glaring need? We brought up wide receiver for the Seahawks. I feel like the Patriots are going to need some new depth in the defensive backfield and on the defensive line. They're looking pretty good at linebacker, but I mean, is there anything that jumps out at you or potential free agent of they could target either team perhaps?
I think the Patriots would be a team that lines up to sign a Parnell McPhee type. Like they always are looking for versatile defensive linemen. Yeah. And in addition to that, like when you look at the draft and trying to replace some players, for a cheap price, which is what Patriots are always trying to do, you got to think that they'd target somebody like a Quentin Rollins, a Trey Waynes, cornerback from Michigan State, if he were to fall. They're kind of set, I feel like, offensively. I wouldn't be like overly shocked if they tried to bring in like a tight end to complement Gronk, like a Max Williams, or the burner from Miami. His name's escaping me right now. I haven't done like full draft analysis, but
Right.
I think the Seahawks, who actually have Marshawn Lynch signed for another year, could look to replace him as well. I think that they could try and draft a huge wide receiver if you were to fall to them. You know, they are a team that could really benefit from an explosive tight end as well. I don't think they'd take like a defensive lineman because I just don't think they would find their mutant at that point. They would be getting more of like a solid player, whereas the Seahawks are always looking at the spark rating for some crazy dude in the third or fourth.
Yeah.
They can athletically just terrorize people.
I think New England's main priority is going to be re-signing Devin McCourty, even over Revis.
You can't replace him in this draft.
Yeah, and I mean you can't replace Revis either, but at the same time, you know, look at Brandon Flowers last year. He was cut by the Chiefs. San Diego signed a 1-year, $3 million deal, and he had a fantastic year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can find those veteran corners that sometimes slip through the cracks and get cut and sign to 1-year show-me deals where they want to make some money and go to a good team.
Yeah.
It's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
Revis is kind of an example of that, but obviously everyone knew he was still, you know, best corner in the league. Seattle, I really think they need a receiver. I think Dorian Green-Beckham, who we both really have faith in, even though he has great talent, great size, and obviously has a little bit of character questions. I think he'd be a really good get in the first round. And I think Seattle is pretty much
a team that would take him there.
Yeah,
too.
I agree. They're a team that I don't think they're going to do much in free agency. They're going to re-sign Russell. They'll make some minor moves here and there. They'll throw an offer to Maxwell's way, but I don't think they're going to make a huge push to him. And I think that they're going to draft an offensive lineman, a couple corners for depth, and just kind of try to replenish the system a little bit.
Yeah, they're so deep as a team.
Yeah.
That they're like hard to predict in the draft. They really do have their truly unique board.
Yeah.
They really
sometimes it works amazingly, and sometimes you get Christine Michael in the second round, who everyone doesn't care about anymore.
Yeah, there's just random guys like that are definitely going to happen.
Yeah, no one's perfect in the draft.
Yeah.
I mean, Belichick just got his 4th Super Bowl, and he's missed on so many picks.
Yeah, he's one of the worst, actually, at that. He's just so good at creating competition on his own team, even if his picks aren't always that great, and just destroying the draft, like getting the maximum value for trading down all the time.
He would probably be better if he had no first-round picks, and like if he had 2 seconds instead of the first and second, he'd probably do better.
Yeah, probably.
Because they'll just draft whatever guys teams pass on, and it'll work out well.
Yeah. Although I guess when they've had like higher picks, they've done okay.
Gerard Mayo, Devin McCourty's first-round pick, but he had to move to safety. But Dominique Easley is a guy that's still on their team that could potentially
first rounder.
Well, I know. I'm just saying in terms of provide depth defensively on the defensive line. If you know,
he's a guy who didn't get to do much because he was coming off the ACL.
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's
that guy
a Patriots draft pick.
Dominated in college.
Yeah, his first
before
season.
His injury.
Yeah,
but still, Dom Ease, man. That guy did scare me though when he says he doesn't like watching sports. He only likes watching cartoons. Kind of scared
that's
me.
a little bit too much like a Jay Smooth comment.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I know you're a defensive lineman, so your job's not like overly complicated, but I guess you just want to hear guys like totally all hard for football.
It's always nice if you hear the Kobe Bryant people talking or the Earl Thomas types, to use a better football reference. So if you had to predict one of these teams to go back to the Super Bowl, which one would you take?
I would take the Seahawks.
Okay.
I still think their team's super young. I think the NFC's a little bit
top heavy.
Yeah, but it's a little top heavy, but it's not really very substantial. Like basically all they have to do is beat probably one good team in the playoffs, and they're in the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, I agree. I would take the Seahawks.
Pat's got to go through the Ravens, Steelers.
The Ravens almost beat them this year with a really bad
Broncos,
team.
The Colts. I mean, there's some deep freaking teams.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if somehow
Buffalo.
I was just going to say Rex Ryan with that defense.
You never
know. He's done it before with the Jets against Brady.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. Basically, for me, Seattle has to worry about Green Bay and Dallas. Those are, and obviously
and potentially the Saints, because they seem to like suck and then be good.
Well, everyone thought they'd be good this year, and they were garbage again. Yeah. Obviously, any team can improve with perfect offseason, perfect draft, but Dallas beating Seattle this year almost beat Green Bay. They have really primed to develop well. They finally got some decent coaches.
They'll depend big time on their free agency.
Yeah, obviously, if they make the decision, let's let DeMarco Murray go, and then he actually was a huge reason why the rushing game was so important, and Randall comes in, only gets 1,100 yards with the lion's share instead of 1,800. That's a big difference, and that's completely possible.
Oh, yeah.
Randall looks good, but you don't know until someone gets 25 carries a game. If his body can hold up, if he can continue to work through everything, and there's always a chance that Dez somehow leaves. It's extremely unlikely because they franchise him, but it's possible. And if Dez leaves, that offense is completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, say everything you want.
Unless they go for Demaryius because he's way cheaper.
That's not going to happen because Demaryius won't leave. But so I just like Seattle's ability to basically have less wolves in the arena.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't trust Philadelphia at all.
I don't either. But anyways, so those are our off-season thoughts for those teams. We both agreed that the Seahawks would likely be the team that repeats.
Till next time, great game. Hopefully, off-season is just as exciting. We'll be back soon for the NFL with draft coverage and off-season news. Thanks for listening.
See ya, man.